In this video about PEAQ, we're going to be diving into one of the most exciting layer 1s in the Web3 ecosystem, including an interview with the founder. Personally, I think that this is a breakthrough in decentralization, so let's get started. In this video, we will be integrating an interview with the founder, Leo Dorlöchter, and I'll be explaining additional content regarding PEAQ, which he has been discussing in the interview, which basically formed the thesis surrounding an investment from our venture capital, MN Capital. So, yes, we do have a slight bias when it comes to the ecosystem, as we have been doing an investment into the layer 1, and we have been doing investments into multiple applications within the PEAQ ecosystem. And if you think it's interesting to follow, make sure to follow the MN Capital X account, where you can see all the investments that we have been doing and the updates that we are providing. However, if we want to ask what PEAQ is all about, let's ask the founder himself what the vision is behind PEAQ and what it actually does and when this entire journey has started.
Yeah, so the journey goes back all the way to 2017, where the three co-founders, Max, Till, and I, met in Berlin for the first time. And back then it was early Ethereum days. Till introduced us to the concept of running decentralized applications. And we kind of went down a rabbit hole. There were lots of meetups here. And it was also the time where IOTA was just starting. And IOTA had this vision of building, enabling the machine economy. And that really, captured our attention. And we then looked into the technology and thought about building use cases, but also realized quite quickly that back then L1s, L2s didn't exist yet. L1s weren't really usable, too expensive, not scalable enough. Those that said they were scalable enough didn't scale back then. And we then took that and said, okay, let's focus on working with enterprises to see if there are real problems, if there are real problems that can be solved when you apply IoT to blockchain. And went then on quite a journey for a couple of years, working with the likes of Audi and the Volkswagen Group, for example, on a decentralized charging platform, because they said, hey, charging is super fragmented. Our users need to sign up with all those different centralized providers, and also private charging stations. You can't make them available for your neighbors, for example, to charge at. So they actually called us up and said, hey, we have the idea of solving that with a blockchain. And we jumped on that and worked on it for 2 years. Of course, at the end, it's quite clear enterprise blockchain doesn't make sense. I think we all arrived at that point because in the end, it's still a centralized consortia. It's still not, building this neutral infrastructure that's needed. But essentially, that was the first DePIN use case, which we started working on in 2019 till 2021. And in 2021, along the way, we realized charging is just one use case. There's parking, there's car sharing, drones, and essentially anything in a smart city, fits into the same pattern. Because if you build those use cases all on Web 2 platforms, they are closed systems. This is one closed platform for one use case. And there's no interoperability of the different machines and devices beyond that closed single platform. And this is kind of where it became clear that in order for a machine economy to function, right, where you have robotaxis, where you have sensors, where you have users, where you have drones, whatever you can imagine, you need to build that on an open system where they all have a identity and an open system where they can transact with each other, and where those different use cases like parking or charging are business logic in terms of a decentralized application, or now called a DePIN, that runs on chain. And essentially those different machines and devices can compose themselves between the different applications and freely transact on an open system. And that's kind of where the vision of PEAQ came from, which we started building in 2021. And yeah, 1.5 years into building PEAQ, the term DePIN emerged, which was amazing because we've been building a layer 1 for DePIN all that time. And that really helped us then to, projects were finding us, we were finding projects. And that's how we built an ecosystem of 50 DePINs building on PEAQ prior to launch. Because we've done that all the time, all along, and we have that much bigger vision and long-term vision, and not just there to capture a certain narrative.
I think PEAQ has a very unique strategy where it came from Web 2 instead of Web 3. So we'll talk about that in a little bit, but there's an enterprise interest and you build a solution for that instead of the other way around. And that is why I think PEAQ is unique. But for people that are unfamiliar yet with what PEAQ is, in a few sentences, how would you describe PEAQ?
Yeah. So at the core, what we're building is, we call it the backbone of the machine economy. So that's a bit more of an abstract sentence, but more granular. PEAQ is a layer 1 blockchain for DePINs and providing all functionality and tooling that DePINs need to be built quickly, but also providing DeFi primitives that are focused on machines and devices. So it's really about building that layer 1 computer, essentially, which has all those standardized functionalities and tooling for DePINs to build faster and more efficient. And then also the financial DeFi primitives, which allow for the financial interactions of machines and DePINs. And yeah, that is PEAQ in a nutshell. And multiple DePINs together, in our view, create the machine economy.
We've just heard Leo discuss everything surrounding DePIN, and the origin of DePIN comes from IoT, and the origin of IoT comes from the machine economy. And the machine economy is basically just a new version of economy in itself. We have the financial economy. As we can see on the screen, it is basically just a progress in a technological world where we are having advancements of machines being able to connect and being able to talk to each other and being able to understand value and to exchange that value. And you might also understand that having the machine economy where we can utilize machines can also be an ideal ingredient for advanced AI agents in the future, where they are going to be scripting and doing advanced tasks between each other. So we had the machine economy and the vision of the machine economy, which is intertwined with IoT, AI, and blockchain. And that, after a few years, basically made the entire thesis surrounding DePIN, which is the centralized physical infrastructure network. And that's the entire name of the vertical, which has two different categories, which is hardware-based and software-based. And hardware-based is basically having a physical product that you need to buy, which is usually a node or anything comparable to that. In the case of Akash, for instance, you need to buy a node, which can make you money or gives you access to certain parts of the ecosystem. In the case of Helium, you need to buy a certain wireless router instead of a node, but it's a comparable example. In the sense of having a software example, then you're looking at adding an application towards your mobile phone or towards your computer, where, in the case of Silencio, you are measuring noise surrounding the places where you can come and earn a certain reward for that. Or you can use a camera like with Natix, where you map out the entire world with certain applications within DePIN. So this basically opens up a whole new market where you can utilize value that you have been making but didn't get any reward for. We all have a mobile phone that has additional space to utilize the actual power of that device, which is the same for a mobile phone, which is the same for just moving around. So that's why I think in essence, DePIN is super interesting, and that's why I asked Leo, why is DePIN so interesting, and why would people want to choose PEAQ as their layer one to build on?
The really interesting part of DePIN is that we can actually create value and a value proposition that wasn't possible without a blockchain or without Web3. So here comes a vertical in the space that creates completely new business models and completely new goods and services that are not possible without, because that has been always a question. Why do you need a blockchain, right? Why do you, is it just there to speculate, which a lot of people outside of the space still say and think that there's actual no real utility. But DePIN is changing that, because you can, for the first time, incentivize individuals and also companies to build out physical infrastructure. And giving a concrete example, sensor networks, I think, is a beautiful example that when you drive through or when you try to collect data in terms of what is happening in a city at any time in a certain location, if you do it in a centralized way, that's almost impossible. The amount of cameras you need to install everywhere globally to exactly know what's happening in a smart city at a certain point in time, you cannot orchestrate that in a centralized way. But if you incentivize anyone driving through a city with a smartphone, like Natix is doing, for example, and you just put it in your car and it records if there's an accident or if there's a traffic jam or if there's something happening in that city, and in a data compliant way can feed that into the system. This is creating the basis for having the real world digitized in real time. And that's something just impossible to capture in Web 2. And I think the moment I realized, or we realized back then also with the charging infrastructure, when you incentivize individuals to connect their private charging stations to an open system, the amount of charging stations you can make available scales crazily, because there are many more private charging stations than public charging stations. And people can earn from charging sessions happening, and we can just scale infrastructure much faster than it would be possible in a centralized way. So it's a big innovation in capital formation as well, because it's not one entity that pays for all the infrastructure, but the costs are split equally between everyone participating, and then also the rewards are split between everyone creating value on the network. So it's a business model revolution, only possible with a blockchain and token incentives.
The PEAQ ecosystem, rather than a high throughput layer one as Solana or any of the other layer ones out there?
I mean, first of all, PEAQ is also a high throughput L1, and it's scaling like in the next couple of months. It's a bold statement, but we will outperform many high throughput L1s significantly. So that's in the making, because of course scale and low cost is a fundamental requirement for DePINs and the machine economy to scale. At the same time, then having additional functionality such as machine identities, access control, data verification, payment, and so on, things that every DePIN needs, but that other chains don't have available out of the box. So the stack and the developer experience we're building is just continuously improved and optimized for DePINs. And there's a lot in the works there as well. So if you build a DePIN at some point on PEAQ, of course it's a work in progress, but at some point it's going to be super easy to build on chain and have all the functionalities with a few lines of code integrated in your app. And part of that is already there today. Then additionally, the DeFi ecosystem that's emerging more and more on PEAQ, so it's still early. The first primitives will be deployed quite soon, but those are also focused and optimized on, okay, what do DePINs need, and also what, for example, do tokenized machines need? Like, can there be new borrowing and lending protocols where tokenized machines are collateral? So, like, really creating also the ecosystem beyond beyond traditional DeFi primitives, and thinking about, okay, what do DePINs need? What does the machine economy need? And builders see that we're working and planning not just on capturing short-term momentum on a specific narrative, but that we're working long-term on doing one thing after the other and doing the right things right. And they see themselves growing in that ecosystem and on that journey and the vision. And of course, I think one reason, which is much less tangible, but it's culture and values. A lot of the DePIN founders are quite impact driven. They're quite serious in what they want to do and what they want to build, and less focused on just, creating a thing that creates a lot of hype quickly, where they can exit quickly on the market. Because I would argue that majority of the founders in the space are more focused on making money quickly, and less are focused on having a long-term impact. And there's nothing wrong with making money, of course. However, and what we see in the DePIN space is that there are more and more founders that not only care about making money, but that also care about building something meaningful and creating value. And that's the culture in the PEAQ ecosystem forming, and that's attracting a lot of like-minded founders. And then things like the brand, of course, matters. A lot of enterprises engage with PEAQ, and we make introductions to the DePINs. And there are a few things coming out in the next weeks where big global brands are doing something with the DePIN on PEAQ, and it's going to be announced and shared publicly. So they also see how we can help them with the demand side, because the enterprises want to engage with PEAQ as the brand and the positioning. They like that a lot. Yeah.
As Leo explained, providing an ecosystem that basically protects you against all the uncertainties of the Web3 ecosystem is something we need, as there are so many great founders that list and build a protocol but are getting screwed over by malicious actors in the terms of venture capitals, KOLs, or whatever party there is. So if you build an ecosystem that provides funding through PEAQ in this essence, or provides legal advisory services, or provides the ability to get listed, or provides everything you need as a network to flourish as a protocol, I think that's something that the entire ecosystem basically needs. And that's what I think many protocols need. And that's why also most of the layer ones are pivoting towards a specific use case. We all know the PEAQ right now, which is a DePIN layer one. We also see specific AI layer ones in the sense of Near. We've seen a RWA layer one in the sense of Avalanche. So those are all starting to exist, which at some point are going to be connected with each other. Now, the entire ecosystem is significantly growing. I've got a picture on the screen, which is the community is currently more than 500,000 people. More than 4.5 million in machines are connected to the PEAQ ecosystem. We have more than 2.6 billion in total machine value connected with PEAQ. And we have a month-to-month increase of 50% in terms of PEAQ ecosystem machines being added, which is a massive growth taking place, utilizing the ability to quickly expand with all the value that's being created, that especially in certain regions of the world is going to generate a lot of additional value into people's their lives. So it's expanding, and as Leo has been telling us at the beginning, he has been building this for multiple years, and doing that, he created an ecosystem of more than 50 DePINs. In December, there were 46, and that ecosystem is pretty big in the sense that we have wallets being integrated, we have integrations with other protocols out there that are not DePIN, we have got the apps themselves. So we have Natix, which we have also invested in. We've got multiple other projects that we have not been investing in and are currently live, like for instance Silencio. And there are some more interesting aspects of the entire PEAQ ecosystem, which you can see on the bottom left and the top right, which is on the bottom left, we have all the enterprises in the Web2 ecosystem that have been plugged into the PEAQ ecosystem. For instance, Airbus, Bosch, and on the top right, we see machines that are connected, which is again Bosch, but also Sony and also multiple other companies. So that's why I wanted to ask him on the fact that there are so many Web2 protocols of Web2 companies connected with PEAQ. And that is a big step forward into adoption, which has been a hurdle for most of crypto. But how was it possible for PEAQ to actually being able to connect with the Web2 companies and get them on board? How did you manage to get them in? And what are they looking for to get out of a collaboration with PEAQ?
Yeah, so it's been a long journey, and definitely our time before we built PEAQ the way we know it today has helped a lot, because we've built a lot of those relationships prior to 2021 already. So we made ourselves a name in the space as working also on IoT enterprise solutions, and we could pull quite some of those relationships into our current role. And at the same time, using our warm network of advisors and investors to get those introductions, and being really able to show, look, there is real new value that's being created here with those DePINs, which might be interesting for you in terms of consuming that value or co-creating that value, creating new business models, which, with the DePIN together. So we basically said, hey guys, we take you on that journey with us. We make all the introductions that are interesting to you. And it's like a matchmaking process. And we make sure you don't get disrupted by this completely. At least you're aware of what's happening. And we bring you the things that we think are interesting for you. And this is how we got many of them on board that said, yeah, that makes sense. Finally, something in the space that actually makes complete sense and is legit. And yes, please take us on that journey and help us get exposure to that space emerging.
The origin of PEAQ is German-based, so it's European, and that's why I wanted to use this picture where it shows so many Web2 companies that are currently connected with the PEAQ ecosystem. I just discussed Bosch, Airbus, but also T-Mobile, Lufthansa, Continental, Audi, MasterCard, and way more relatively smaller companies have been connected with the PEAQ ecosystem. And as Leo has been describing, they are getting value out of the use case of Web3, which is super positive. Now, in order to make that work, we need to have a ecosystem where also the retail investor can actually be able to get value from PEAQ. So, as PEAQ has been recently launching, I asked Leo what the key milestones are for PEAQ for 2025 and what the campaign is all about that has recently been launched on the 5th of February.
Absolutely. Yeah, so the name of the campaign is Get Real. And we started working on that 1 year ago already. We thought, okay, what can we do as a campaign to really help the PEAQ ecosystem go from 0 to 1 and to bootstrap the initial growth? And we analyzed different campaigns. I mean, there were growth campaigns where you provide liquidity and do other things, but all of them felt like not providing sustainable value, because if you just go somewhere, add liquidity, you get an airdrop and you move your liquidity somewhere else to get the next airdrop, that's not really bringing lasting value to the network. So we thought about how do we set it up that it helps our DePINs and also PEAQ. And the campaign, essentially, it's a custom user interface on getreal.peak.network, where when you sign up, you first get a Piconaut. You can choose one of four characters, which were developed in collaboration with Koto, the agency that recently redesigned the Call of Duty characters. So they're 4 base characters that anyone can choose. And as you go through the campaign, that character develops further and further and further. So there's a big gamification aspect of it. And then you have a lot of tasks that you can fulfill, quests. And those quests are actually you becoming an active member in all the different DePINs on the PEAQ ecosystem. You sign up there, and the more value you create for the DePINs, the more points you get on the leaderboard, and you can rank higher and higher. There are also, of course, quests for DeFi, like providing liquidity, adding liquidity, but that's a separate leaderboard because we want to make sure that the hardcore DePIN users are not just easily overtaken by a few whales, getting higher. So there are different leaderboards for different categories. KOLs also have a leaderboard, and also that is slightly separate because we really want to make sure that the average person, which doesn't have a lot of liquidity or doesn't have a lot of reach, also has a strong chance by working hard in the campaign of ranking well. So the campaign is all about growing DePINs on PEAQ. And by growing DePINs on PEAQ, we grow the on-chain activity of PEAQ because every action they are doing is on-chain activity. So it's an absolute win-win for the DePINs and for PEAQ, and also has the long-term goal since the campaign goes for 1 year. And the bet is basically if someone has done that for a whole year, the likelihood that they will just continue is very high because they get the DePIN rewards. They are really deep in the community. They have built their Piconaut to a high level. And that's basically a growth engine we've built for the entire ecosystem and the chain, because we're of course aware that crossing, from a new L1 to an established L1 is a difficult path to go through. And that's a key part of the strategy of, getting there and really being one of the most active chains out there in terms of users, in terms of activity. Yeah, so with Get Real having started yesterday, that definitely has been a big key milestone, getting that year-long growth campaign for the entire ecosystem going. Additionally, the DeFi ecosystem, or machine DeFi ecosystem as we call it, like really getting the right primitives on chain and starting to build a DeFi ecosystem which is different, and that's in motion already. So that's another big thing that is happening this year. We're also going to set up key strategic locations where we have big demo spaces working together with governments. So really aligning on, having smart city demo spaces, showcasing all the things that are possible, and also making sure that we're working with the governments that support new regulations, which for example are needed in the machine economy, like frameworks for machine tokenization that anyone can invest into. So those things are all in the works and in the making. And then of course, on the capital side, right, like there's a lot going on in terms of the making the treasury bigger and bigger, attracting more and more lighthouse DePINs, building on PEAQ, and really getting closer to the point of having the initial stack of the machine economy in place, where there's the chain level, super high performance and throughput. There are actually updates coming in the next month where we will prove to the world and show to the world how we have extreme high TPS in production with super high decentralization, right? Like those things. Then on the tooling and infra level, having everything in place that's needed. And what I said before, the DeFi primitives that are focused on the machine economy. So by the end of the year, since I'm also leading the product side of things, I want to be at a point where I'm like, yes, that's a whole holistic, beautiful thing, and everything is there that projects need on all layers of the stack, because there are many layers. Yeah.
I think that this campaign is super interesting, and in that sense, it's a campaign that lasts for a year. So if you provide value for the entire year, you'll be rewarded and you'll be ranked higher in the leaderboard. For more information, you can find the campaign in the description beneath. There's a link that you can click on. You can get your own avatar and you can create value for yourself, which is, I think, a super cool addition to add And it's going to provide a chain reaction across the ecosystem because all the DePINs will be connected to the campaign, resulting into a network effect that expands PEAQ. So getting into a conclusion about PEAQ in itself, and I think that this provides a lot of background information on what PEAQ is. I think Leo has been explaining it fairly well of what PEAQ is doing and why it's so interesting. And I think that that PEAQ is a strong fundamental layer with 8 years of experience of building this up. And from my experience, they are only building and doing something after they have been testing it multiple times, checking it, seeing whether it fits with the vision. That therefore I think that the ecosystem is going to expand over the next few years. It's going to be a long-term play. You need to have an horizon for this. And it's a new emerging ecosystem that's going to be built up. It's technically just RWA and DeFi integrated with each other with Web2 partners. And that's why I think it's a must-have component in this market. They provide additional value for people, their lives, through utilizing spare space into machines that everybody has. So it's just generating more value for people, their lives, through DePINs, which I think in itself is a movement. And I think it's also super fun. And I think that I've been in the space for 8 years now, that a concept like PEAQ basically brings me back to when I started in crypto. And I think that therefore, this is a breakthrough for the markets in itself. Where does it go to? I think we have barely started with PEAQ and its ecosystem. There's only one DePIN listed after the chain itself went live. And if you start comparing the layer ones with each other, then the valuation of PEAQ is relatively low. It's currently around 1.5 billion FDV, circulating its less between 200 to 250 million. And as a comparison, Avalanche is currently live for multiple years, has a valuation of 20 billion FDV at the current market circumstances. So yes, there's a lot of upside to come, but I think there's a lot of value to be created with people, for people, their lives as well. And I think that's the most important part. And that's why MN Capital has invested into PEAQ. I hope you have been enjoying this update about PEAQ, which is different than my usual updates. Let me know in the comments beneath if you have enjoyed this one. Which project should we be having next? Let it know. And also make sure to subscribe. I'll see you again. Ciao.